Market reaction to Brexit, what do you think?
I mean, absolute uncertainty, and that's what the market hates. And I think we're in a very manipulative situation right now because there's the political aspects on both sides of the ocean, and how corporations deal with those circumstances are going to influence what happens going forward in the UK and also here in our election. And what I'm talking about is if all of a sudden we see JP Morgan and all these different big financial companies say, you know what, we're just moving everybody to Berlin. Now there's a tangible impact on jobs, and that's going to influence the conversation. And it's the same in the United States. Once, if we see that, we're talking about all this nationalism, Trump versus, Senator Clinton or Secretary of State Clinton, if all these businesses are reacting to this take back our country movement by leaving, that sets the tone for the election as well. Look, if it happened that all these companies said, we're out, why would it be any different here? But on the flip side, if the United States is open and we adhere to our treaties, then all of a sudden, tech companies in particular in the UK who want to be able to work with the European Union and have the treaties already in place, they might come here. And if you see a big movement of tech companies here because, there's no better tech, foundation and employee base and customer base than the United States for tech, we might see a wholesale inflow of those companies, which on one end says to the UK, Brexit was a big mistake, and it also sends the message to our economy and to U.S. voters that protectionism and cutting off those treaties would be a huge mistake.
You mentioned immigration. I mean, that's certainly a big part of it in the UK, and that's a big part of the nationalistic discussion that's happening, really led by Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, look, immigration takes a lot of different forms. There's high-end, for visas for employees that you can't get. There's, people being concerned about their lives, concerned about their jobs. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump's approach. I'm a tech guy. I mean, I've invested in companies that allow for or create the ability to test and evaluate people before they come. A company called Converis, and that we've worked with Israel and Southern American companies that say, okay, before you come into this country, we're going to put you through this test, and we're going to ask you these series of questions, and we can tell with a high degree of accuracy, 85%, and it'll learn to be better, whether or not you're going to have a negative impact, whether or not you're a terrorist, whether or not you're a radical Islamic terrorist, however you want to define people. So there's technology, I think, that are first steps that everybody's ignoring. And so I would just take a completely different approach.
Are you concerned about the tone, though, the nationalistic tone, whether it's in the UK or here?
Oh, absolutely. It's scary, right? I mean, look, in my mind, hate never accomplishes anything. No one's ever won with hate. And I think that's the fundamental problem. And hate doesn't solve problems. Hate doesn't improve the economy. Hate doesn't make people, doesn't protect our people anymore, doesn't protect the borders anymore. And so we've got to be very careful about the verbiage we use because there's no win there.
I don't know that you can, I don't think it's fair to connect the anti-transgender bathroom rhetoric to the crazy guy in Florida
Right.
killing all these people, all these gay people at this gay club. But I thought it was interesting that you gave $1 million to the Dallas police right after that happened.
Yeah, I just thought it was the right thing to do. I mean, a lot of times I've said that after military service, the most patriotic thing you can do is pay your taxes. And the natural response to that, well, if you want to pay more, feel free to write a check. And that's what I've done multiple times, not just this time. There's several, 4 or 5, maybe 6 now times I've written checks to the Treasury of the city of Dallas for a variety of purposes, earmarked for something specific. And, given what was going on, I wanted to set an example, and I wanted to send a message that this shouldn't be tolerated, and I'm going to help.
Pay your taxes, that's a natural segue to a candidate who's refused to release his tax forms. What do you think about that?
Irrelevant. Absolutely irrelevant. I mean, I know for my taxes, when it's tax time, there's a big living room table that I have, and there's big stacks all around the table, and I just look at the signature pages, and it takes me 45 minutes still to sign all that stuff. And so I couldn't actually I went and looked, but in any previous years to this last one, I couldn't have told you how much I've made or what was on my taxes. And it's certainly not a reflection of net worth. And I don't think it's a reflection of how much anybody gives to charity or anything. And, any one given year may be up or down. So I don't care. I don't care if they release their taxes.
So why do you think he's not doing it then?
I have no idea. My guess is that it may have been a down year for him. And, look, depending on what your sources of income are, you may say, I've made a fortune in the market, but I'm not going to take my profits. And he might have had a negative income. And that certainly wouldn't match up to his brand. So it doesn't matter.
And yet you had some comments recently suggesting that he's actually gotten dumber as time has gone.
Yeah, and that's pretty straightforward, right? So if you look at how he's managed his campaign, he went from maybe I'll be the nominee to, okay, I'm pretty much the presumptive nominee, even before the others fell out of the race. If he was smart, he would have started to learn that, okay, in a campaign, there's certain, in a national campaign, there's certain things I'm going to have to do. There's certain skill sets I'm going to need to make me smarter about running a national campaign. So did he go out and hire people who can create a ground game? No. Did he go out and hire people that could help him with, on an advisory basis, to help with the whole political machine that's required to get the vote out? He tried, and all those people just keep on getting fired and turning over. And so rather than getting smarter and bringing in the help that it's needed to run a campaign, he's doing the exact opposite. And where we've gotten to is him pretty much being dependent on his kids. And it's not like, they're good kids, they're smart kids, I've met them, they're impressive in every which way. But I don't know that I'd want them all of a sudden just coming in to run a campaign. This isn't Shark Tank, right, where it's like, okay, you can help with this company. We're talking about running a campaign for the President of the United States. And, so getting stupider means not being able to hire the skill sets that you need to make you smart. And so I think he's gotten worse, and we're seeing it happen right before our very eyes.
I had dinner with some tech CEOs recently, people but it was off the record dinner, but I will tell you that when we were going around the table talking about politics and talking about vice presidential choices for Hillary, one of these CEOs said you.
Good.
Seriously.
Good.
So?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not going to happen, but you always you never know until you take the first step and you put it out there. Anything's possible. But I think tech illiteracy at the top for both candidates is a huge problem. We talked about how do you deal with immigration? How do you deal with radical Islamic terrorists trying to come into the country from wherever, right? There's no way just physically you can just interview everybody. You're going to need to use tech, whether it's Converse, whether it's facial recognition. There's a variety of other options. Tech is going to get us there. Somebody's got to at least start to understand those things and how they apply to all the big issues. We're also, you talk about dealing with the future. Autonomous cars, robotics, AI, machine learning. Jobs are going to disappear. There's going to be jobs that are gone, just like, making records in Terre Haute, Indiana were gone. Making cameras from Kodak in New York were gone. Coal in Western Kentucky, they're gone. Those jobs are gone. The question is, what are you going to do in anticipation of the fact that we may not have replacements? If you don't anticipate, if you don't understand the issues, you can't come up with solutions. And I think that's a relevant problem that no one has the absolute answer, but at least I can help them start to understand that and start to come up with solutions.
I finally want to switch gears a little bit to talk about insider trading in the SEC.
I like to talk about that subject.
I do too. You filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court it really hits the history of this on the head, which is to say that the definition of insider trading
has never been defined. It doesn't exist, right? But there's even a bigger problem, right? The question is, what's the job of the SEC? The job of the SEC is to enable capital formation. Okay, how have they done? When you look at the end of the year results from the SEC where they talk about what they've done, they never do any research or show any evidence at all to say that they've improved capital formation. And if you look at what's happened over the last 20 years, the number of public listings has been cut in half to under 4,000 and declining. If you look at the number of IPOs, which is capital formation,
there have been 2 venture-backed tech IPOs this year,
and there's just the number in general are falling. And in fact, I saw some data that said over the last 5 years, 15% of the money raised through IPOs has gone to China. And I don't even know in terms of other countries. So it's not even the United States that is benefiting the most from IPOs and a lot of vertical markets, right? So that's the second thing. The second question for the SEC is, do people have more confidence in the markets? Do you know anybody who thinks the market's safer today than it was 10 or 20 years ago? Do you know anybody who thinks that says they have more confidence in the stock markets today than they did 20 years ago? And we're not even starting to introduce the concept of high frequency trading and market structure issues. Yeah, that's a big part of it. So that's part two.
But I think the role of the SEC is also to make sure there's a fair and level playing field in the markets and take away advantages and take away illegal advantages.
If you can't do the first two, you can't do the third.
But you got to do the third too.
Well,
someone's got to be the
so
cop,
okay,
right?
so let's talk about the third, right? If you really want to make a level playing field, you create bright line rules. You make it so everybody understands. So when we talk about this tippy and tippies, there is nobody, even in the SEC, who can give you a cogent description of what the problem is.
What an illegal stock tip is.
What nobody knows, right? They take it to the courts and they create some of their most ridiculous suits ever. You know.
I mean, there are some. All right, the CEO of a biotech company calls up Martha Stewart and says, "Hey, my drug's not approved."
Great.
Okay, that's a pretty clear one.
That's pretty clear. But again, the question isn't can you catch somebody? But if you're a lawyer, that works for the SEC, the more people you catch, the better your job security is, and the better the job you're going to get when you leave the SEC to go work in private practice. But that doesn't make the country safer. That doesn't make the market safer. If you want, I'll give you a perfect example, right? I had a scenario. I tend not to talk to CEOs of public companies because I don't trust the SEC. They can come in and find anything, anytime. So I just don't trade with them. I don't talk to them. But I called up, I had a scenario, and I called up the SEC and I videotaped this whole thing and put it on YouTube. I said, I have a question. Before I trade or do anything, I want to know if something's legal. Can you help me? So then they were nice. They sent me to somebody else who said, okay, what's the question? They said, we can't answer questions, but they just wanted to hear the question. And they said, what you have to do is go to this page on the SEC.gov website. I went to that page on the SEC.gov website. You know what it was? It was an image of a fax of a page from 1980. This is on their website last year saying send in 8 copies of your request and maybe they'll reply to it at some point in time. No assurances. Now, if you truly wanted to stop insider trading, if you truly wanted people to follow the law, you are A, going to make it so someone can ask a question and get an answer because that's inherently going to reduce the problem. B, you're going to publish everything in an easy to understand format. So you don't get a Phil Mickelson stuck in the middle of something. I'll give you another example of insider trading a suit they brought against somebody. There was a guy at a railroad company in Illinois, I think it was, and he was a middle-level manager, and he's driving to work. And every day for a couple of weeks, whatever the period was, he's seeing these limos. In this city in Illinois, you don't see limos. There's limos in the parking lot. He thinks, maybe we're getting acquired. I'm going to go buy some options. So he does. They got acquired. The SEC sued him for insider trading. He had no other information, no knowledge whatsoever.
Deduction. That's all he had.
Nothing. Yeah, he just smart deduction, right? Intuition. And they sued him for insider trading. That's how ridiculous the SEC is. The SEC has no interest in stopping insider trading. They have no interest in protecting us against people doing the wrong thing. Look, the Justice Department does more of that than the SEC. If it's criminal and it's really truly insider trading or wrong, the Justice Department deals with it. From the SEC perspective, they're just there about protecting their jobs. If they truly cared about stopping insider trading, they would make it so easy to just go on their website or make a phone call and say, these are the rules. You must follow these rules. Even though there's not an official law.
They might argue that it's a shifting target, that if as soon as you define the rules, the crooks will find a way around them, so
Fine.
It needs to be a little bit vague.
But those are the people that you know are crooks. The problem isn't the crooks who are trying to find their way around it. The problem is the innocent people get caught in this trap and have had no indication of what they were doing is wrong. And in their minds, it appears to be that if there's some sort of deterrent every time they bring a case, right? Boy, I just brought this case against Mark Cuban. We're going to, if we beat him, no one else is going to do it. They're going to learn. Maybe in 2008, when they messed with me, that was the case because media was different. Now, if you walk down the street in New York City in the middle of Wall Street and you listed 10 names of people who were found liable for insider trading, nobody would know who any of them were. Now, maybe some of the people who were found criminally guilty from the Justice Department, but so there is no deterrence. Yeah, there is no deterrence. I get all the time, I have people coming to me that are being hit by the SEC, and they're saying, what do you do? Should I settle? And then this is exactly what I tell them. If you really think you're innocent and you can't afford it, settle, because it's like a speeding ticket.
Yeah.
Nobody knows
So
unless you do it more than once.
What do you hope happens to this case before the Supreme Court? What's going to happen if your amicus brief helps convince the court of something?
I don't know. I mean, the whole thing in filing the amicus brief is to send the message. If you notice, there's an underlying message that says the SEC's responsibilities are A, B, and C that I listed out, and they're not doing any of them, and there's nothing to show that they have any desire to accomplish any of these goals. And so that's always the underpinning. That's why I keep on filing these things. And then on the administrative law of judges, right? That's just wrong, right?
Taking cases away from the courts and letting the SEC, an SEC-appointed lawyer, make the decisions.
We
in
have a
private.
right to a jury trial, right? We have a right to be judged by our peers, not by an employee of the SEC. And if you think of all the things I just said, where the SEC's job, and the SEC's goal is not to protect the public, not to create confidence, not to enhance capital formation. Right now, the reality is the SEC's goal is to create jobs for lawyers at the SEC. There's nothing that they do. You can't name me one thing, not one single thing that the SEC has done in terms of insider trading that is enhanced capital formation, made people more confident in the market, and made it easier for people to understand the laws. Not one single thing. You can't, I can't, they can't, and they know it and they don't care, and that's a real problem. If I was vice president, right, I would be banging on whoever the president was to take insider trading out of the SEC completely. Some of the other things they do are okay. Take it completely out, formalize the law, work with Congress to create the law, and just make it a Justice Department issue. Save billions of dollars, make the world a safer place.